gentlemen, I want to thank you. Thank you very much for coming out. I do sincerely appreciate that. To have folks who are interested in taking time out of their weekend, their Saturday, come and listen to people talk, I mean, you don't see that very often. So I sincerely appreciate your being here. Thank you very much. But, as my high school biology teacher said, back many years ago, everything has a but. Kid, biology, anyway, but I don't know if you know what you're about to get into. It turns out that the subject I'm about to talk to you about is dangerous. Incredibly, horribly, mind-boggling dangerous. And so I think it is my duty to help you guys out so that you understand what you're about to get into, to give you a warning from Florida's past. All right, very good. Okay, warning from the residents of this great state of Florida to the residents of this great state of Florida. You are hereby under notice that the subject we're about to explore has been deemed the greatest menace facing the church today. It is improper and subversive. It is grievously offensive and inexcusably reprehensible. It is a disgrace even to African cannibals. It is the cause of the rise of college campus suicide. It is a part of a conspiracy to destroy the faith of children. It is one of the primal evils of our country. It is a history of hoaxes, deception, and deceit. It is too vulgar to be mentioned before a mixed audience. It is vulgar, obscene, and indecent matter. It is practically a teaching of free love and monkey teaching. It's an un-American imbalance. We're brainwashing students with unprovable scientific philosophy. It is the surfacing of animalism. It is a failure of our education system. It is connected to Hitler and Stalin. It is moral disintegration. It sanctions murder. And last but not least, it is un-American, atheistic, subversive, and communistic. Ladies and gentlemen, why are you still here? Don't you see how dangerous this subject is? What I've just read to you is nothing that I made up. That is not fiction. That is non-fiction. These are voices from Florida history's past. People rising up against the teaching of evolution. It is nothing new here, and it's not going to go away. It started in the 1920s. I have a long list of years up there, and in each and every one of those years, something happened concerning the teaching of evolution. It started in the 1920s with none other than William Jennings Bryan of Scopes monkey trial fame. He came here to Florida the last years of his life and was a legal resident of Florida. And it is here in Florida we started learning about all these poor children who are being sent away to college and coming back no longer believing in the Bible. These concerned parents went to William Jennings Bryan as he was touring the state, giving all his usual speeches. He was considered the golden orator. It was highly sought after to come speak to groups about a variety of different matters. And at these talks, especially ones he would give about religion and his Bible talks, you'd have parents come up to him very concerned about this matter, asking, what can we do? What is going on? So, Mr. Bryan went ahead and did a bunch of research, and his conclusion was that as they were going on to this Institutes of Higher Learning, they were learning about this thing called evolution as fact, and he did not like that. So he started the crusade here in Florida. Yes, here in Florida. He started that crusade in the 1920s. He had many, many friends in the state legislature. They then went ahead and proposed a bill that would outlaw the teaching of evolution in our schools. That debate over that bill shut down the Florida House. Literally. They debated it, stalemated everything else, and went past midnight one day, still talking about this, still debating it, hotly debating it. And so finally, the Speaker of the House is pounding on the gavel saying, clear the House, clear the House, clear the House, and they still wouldn't get out. They were debating it that much. The bill that was in question was A bill to be entitled an act to prohibit the teaching in any school supported in whole or in part by public funds of any theory that mankind either ascended or descended, covering all the bases there, from a lower order of animals, or any theory of evolution pertaining to the origin, ascent, or descent of mankind, or any theory not in harmony with the biblical account of the creation of mankind, and to prohibit the use or adoption for use in any school supported in whole or in part by public funds of any textbook which contains any theory that mankind either ascended or descended from lower order of animals. I think you get the point. The Florida House passed that bill. The Florida House passed that bill. There were some modifications, but they passed that bill. It was then passed over to the Florida Senate, where they were they weren't into it. They didn't want to take it up. They saw the big hassle and had stirred up in the House, and they decided, we're not going to touch it. But, they has a but. They were hearing testimony from people who were talking about, you know what? There's these textbooks that have this vulgar, horrible material in it. And so, no, the Senate didn't approve the bill without all the teaching of evolution, but rather they passed the bill to start an inquiry at all of the colleges and universities in Florida to take a look at what was in their textbooks. Evolution was a target of that. The presidents of the University of Florida and other universities had to face inquiries about what was in the textbooks in their schools. They actually had to negotiate to make use of those books. Some people on the committee who were doing this inquiry were saying, well, you know what, we need to get rid of the textbooks, get them off the campus altogether. But the presidents were able to negotiate a little bit and were able to finally get it to where, okay, we can keep the textbooks, but they have to be kept in a locked cabinet in a library, and only the teachers and students with special permission had access. Many, many years later, a librarian going through the building saw this locked cabinet and wondered, what is that? They finally got into the cabinet, found a bunch of books about biology and evolution. What are these locked up? They had to go back and do the research to find out why they were locked up. They were dangerous books. At least that was what they were considered back then. Now that, of course, I'm telling you all about the 1920s, but you see a lot of years listed up there. We're talking that it got a huge media attention in Dade County in the 1960s, Pinellas County in the 1970s, Hillsborough County in the 1980s. Hillsborough County actually approved it. Hillsborough County School Board in the 1980s approved the teaching of creationism alongside evolution in their schools. They approved it. They wrote a curriculum. And it was only at the very last minute when a Supreme Court case happened to be going through about the exact same thing that they finally decided, we'll stop right here. And it was never taken up again. Lake County had a big controversy in the 1990s. Haught County in the 2000s. Ladies and gentlemen, this was in the state legislature as recently as 2010. Our state legislature in 2010, 2008, 2009, all these years they were considering bills to do something, balance out the teaching of evolution in our public schools. So, 1920s to the present day. As a matter of fact, this is not going to end. Right now, it's fairly quiet. But we have something called state science standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the bottom line is that those state science standards are going to be up for review and released to the public for input next year. This process happened in 2008 and blew up. It was in all the headlines and all the news about, oh my gosh, there's evolution in our state standards. I have no doubt we're going to see this yet again. No doubt. But with all this controversy, all this stuff going on, I think a legitimate question to ask is, what's actually being taught in our classrooms? Everyone is rising up against the teaching of evolution, but what exactly is being taught in our classrooms? I think it's a good place to start. Let's find out what the hoopla is about. So, in 1996, a brand new concept came to Florida. It was called academic standards. Every single subject in the schools was given a set of standards by Tallahassee saying this is what you need to be teaching about this subject in this grade, And this is what we expect these students to know once they graduate from that grade and move on to the next. So math, they have standards. History has standards. Science has standards. It was brand new back in 1996, this whole concept of state standards. And it was such a weird thing. People didn't quite know, hey, the state capital is coming down telling us here in Dade County or Lake County what to do. That was kind of a big deal back then. And so, interestingly, in those state science standards, in the life sciences section, there was no mention of evolution. And there was a reason for that. It was because there was so much controversy going on over the state standards at all that they did not want to cause any more problem by raising yet more debate concerning evolution. Now, fast forward about a decade, and suddenly our state standards are dramatically out of date. Okay, we need to keep up with the times. So it's time to go ahead and do a regular review and revision of the state standards in all the subjects. Every single subject had a term. When it came turn to the science standards, it was a big deal. Right before the science standards was the math standards, and oh my gosh, the folks at the Department of Education had a tough time getting anybody to provide them any input when it was released for public input. But when the science standards came out, it exploded because, oh my gosh, for the first time in the state of Florida, the teaching of evolution is going to be required. As I said, 1996, that set of standards did not mention evolution. It did mention some concepts as it changes over time and stuff like that. But it did not mention evolution specifically, and kids were not expected to know that once they graduated. However, when they designed the brand new set of standards in 2007 and going into 2008, evolution was not only in the standards, it was prominent in the standards. Prominent meaning that in the 1996 version, the standards were considered a mile wide and an inch deep. Okay, you had to cover a whole bunch of different subjects, but you never got to dive deep into any of them. So the state standards were then revised so that instead you would have fewer subjects to cover, but now you can go more into depth in each one. And so those main topics were called big ideas. And it turned out evolution was one of the big ideas. So now it's forced to be covered, and you have to go in depth about it. People didn't like that. As you can see up here, people really didn't like that. They had hearings statewide about the subject, and whereas they couldn't get anyone to show up for anything concerning math, all of a sudden for science you had auditoriums packed. This is nothing. We had auditoriums packed with hundreds of people. The state science standards cover all of science, ladies and gentlemen. They cover astronomy. They cover geology. They cover physics. They cover chemistry. But no one showed up at any of these hearings to talk about any of that. Every single past one of them wanted to talk about evolution. It was that big of a deal. Finally, we got down to February of 2008, and I was there along with other members of my group, Florida Citizens for Science, and it was amazing because the Board of Education originally was not going to have any public speaking time, but they're under so much pressure, thousands and thousands of phone calls and emails to them. Finally, they relented and said, fine, we'll allow 10 speakers or it was 20 speakers, 10 from one side, 10 from the other, come up and talk to us about it. And that debate was contentious, to say the least. There was a lot of gasps of disbelief from the audience, and a lot of amens, and all sorts of stuff as the speakers were talking, as the Board of Education was talking, and finally it came down to the final vote, and these state standards, with evolution included, passed by one vote. It was that close, it passed by one vote. But we were not done. Now we had state standards, evolution was firmly in place, and this is when the state legislature decided to get involved. The very next week after that Board of Education hearing, then Representative Alan Hayes and Senator Wanda Storms introduced bills in their respective houses about the teaching of evolution, saying that we need to allow teachers to teach the controversy, that we need to allow teachers to go ahead and without fear of reprisal, be able to talk about other ideas when that subject of evolution comes up. It passed the House, and it passed the Senate. Overwhelmingly in both branches. Overwhelmingly. But both branches had slightly different versions. So then we got down to the very end of the session, the very last day of the session, before it was closed out, they could not reconcile both of those bills, and so it just kind of fell away. It was done. But we came that close from having a bill approved, a law here in Florida about that subject. So that is what has happened about our science standards. We now have a set of science standards, but what's in those science standards? A wide variety of things. Kids are learning, should be learning about evolution as early as elementary school. Here are just a couple of things. Identify basic trends in hominid evolution, discuss specific fossil hominids and what they show about human evolution. These are in your standards right now. The kids in public schools are supposed to be taught, this is just a quick little sampling, there's a whole bunch more of the standards that are currently in place here in Florida. But now I have some experience. I am a high school biology teacher. I just started this year. I just started this year. This is my first year of teaching. Career before. Boy, it's hard. It is really hard. But let me tell you, there's standards, and then there's the classroom. The classroom is 25 or so students, and the doors closed. Okay, it's up to me to teach them face to face. That happens in every single biology classroom, in every single school, all throughout the state of Florida. Yes, you have standards, but once you get in the classroom, it's the teacher and the students. And the teacher can pretty much do what he wants, or he or she wants, until someone complains. Maybe honestly, until someone complains. There are tests. Yes, there are standardized tests. For biology, there's an end-of-course exam. Students must take that exam, must pass it. Well, the exam counts for 30% of their overall biology grade, so it's a good idea if they pass it, especially if they don't do very well throughout the course. They have to have biology credit to graduate high school. So now comes the logic. Okay, there's standards, there's a test, so obviously the kid's got to know what's on the test. Maybe not. Okay, you can get around it, you can give it a very surface level treatment and still get the kids to pass, not get A's, to pass. Especially when you are in a very conservative community where no one's going to complain. So now we would ask, okay, well, is it being taught or isn't it? How much is being taught? It has been noted throughout our history here in Florida that, you know what, perhaps it's not being taught as much as we would like. Back in the 1990s, Lake County was considering mandating teaching creationism alongside evolution. There was major public hearings about it, filled the high school auditorium, went on for several meetings. Each meeting went on for hours talking about this. Oh my gosh. Well, one of the guest speakers who got up to talk about it was Dr. Linda Wolf. She was an anthropology professor at the University of Florida. Now, the first thing that's kind of sad about this, there are recordings of this meeting, and she gets up and first introduces herself, and she talks about how she works with monkeys. And you can hear on the recording, people start to laugh. What kind of introduction is that? So she goes on to talk, and she talks and talks and talks. And remember, she's getting students from the public schools coming to her university for her to teach. And she says, and I quote, "In the past 11 years of teaching, it's a rare occasion when I have a student who has the vaguest notion of what evolution is all about. In my experience, evolution is not being taught in Florida's public schools in any recognizable form." And that was back in the 1990s, early 1990s. I would argue that the same kind of thing could be happening today. One of my colleagues from Florida Citizens for Science went to a state science fair. He was a volunteer there helping out. And he went ahead and he pulled a whole bunch of students aside to talk to them, just to see what they knew. These were high school seniors, and there were actually a couple of college students who knew. So as well. So he starts asking them questions about evolution. Remember, this is a state science fair. So he brings them in, talks to them about it, and they can answer any of his questions. So he then starts asking more specifically, were you taught this in high school? And a lot of them are shrugging, I don't remember this. Something about Darwin, I think, but then the teacher just moved on. Then, a couple of the college students that he had in there he was talking to also were trying to answer his questions and couldn't. And they said to him, you know what? I got to college, and I had to take college-level biology courses, and I had to take remedial instruction. I was behind already. The first day I walked in, I was behind. Because in college, evolution is taught interwoven throughout the course from day one to the last day. And the typical high school biology class is taught as one discrete unit for about a month. We're supposed to be taught for one discrete unit for about a month. But college, from day one, evolution is part of every single subject that they're learning throughout that course. So that student complains to my companion, you know what? I'm just not, I had a lot of catching up to do. And that's sad to say. Now, we have never had an actual study here in Florida specifically to find out how much it's being taught, unfortunately. That takes a lot of time, effort, and money to put together a survey of that nature. But one survey was done on a national basis. And they discovered on a national basis that teachers fell into 3 categories. 1, thorough. They teach photosynthesis thoroughly, completely, from beginning to end. They teach evolution just as thoroughly, from beginning to end. Thoroughly. Briefly and cautiously. They might touch upon it. There's a guy named Darwin. He went and sailed around the world, saw a bunch of stuff. He thinks species changed, and moved on with that stuff. Then you have folks who actually add some flavor of creationism to their instruction, in which they, yes, they'll teach evolution thoroughly, but then they'll kind of supplement it with other stuff. Interior design, creationism, scientific creationism, all these other concepts. Or maybe not even that. Maybe they'll just say, well, this is an evolution thing. No one believes that stuff, but I have to teach it to you, so here we go. You know, denigrating the subject of evolution. So those are the 3 main categories that the teachers fell under. So now we're going to do a little audience participation. In a minute, I'm going to show you a pie chart. Okay? A pie chart showing how these are distributed on that, what percentage is distributed on that pie chart. I want you to pretend that's your pie chart. Everybody wants to participate, please put your hands up here, okay? Let's test this out. Come on, put your hands up. Come on. Now, what I want you to do is we're going to practice here, okay? All right, let's see here. What percentage of the people in this room do you think like vegetables? And then, make the section of your chart. How big do you think that percentage is? The people in your room like vegetables. Okay? All right, got about a quarter there. About 10% there, you think? Yeah. I see about 2% there. Okay? All right, how about fruits? Percentage of people in here you think like fruits. Oh, yeah. Apples, bananas, strawberries. Good stuff. Okay, now we're going to practice. Here are 3 categories. I want you to tell me thorough. The percentage of teachers who teach the subject thoroughly nationwide. Give me a percent. What do you think? Okay, I think we're averaging around 15%, 20%, somewhat smaller. Okay. How about briefly and cautiously? They touch on it, but then they move on. Yeah, we're getting a lot bigger now, aren't we? Okay, I hope your arms can stretch. Add creationism. How big of the pie chart? How big of a section do you think that takes up? Oh, your hands are crossed over, so you know where you're at. Yeah. Now, thank you for participating. Now let's take a look at the actual bar chart, the actual pie chart, and see how it breaks down. Thoroughly was roughly 28%. Creationism at about 13%. Those are folks who are blatantly doing something about evolution in the classroom. Blatantly just going around and doing it. Teaching it weekly, nearly 60%. Yeah, they're covering it, but not very well. That leads to students that do remedial work in the college level. If you're interested, that's the book I got that from, Evolution, Creationism, and the Battle of Control America's Classrooms. Those are the folks who did that study and wrote a book about it. I do recommend that book.
What year?
I don't know that top man, I'm sorry. So why? Why is it like that? Why do we have to go through all this rigmarole over the teaching of evolution? Why? I would like to introduce you to Mr., I should say, Reverend Clarence Winslow. He's in the bottom left corner of this slide. During the 1980s, he went from one county to the next, to the next, to the next, imploring the school boards to please, oh please, include the teaching of some form of biblical creation alongside evolution in your classrooms. He was a retired gentleman and actually literally devoted all of his time to this crusade. He did it for 20 years. This was his full-time job, going from one school board to the next, primarily in the Tampa area, trying to get someone to do this. He was persistent. He would not give up, and his persistence paid off. When the Hillsborough County School Board finally had a majority on the board who believed as he did, they voted, as I mentioned earlier, to add creationism to the science curriculum. It passed. They did an actual curriculum. They wrote it. I have a copy of it. But then at the last minute, they canceled the whole endeavor because of the Supreme Court case that was winding through the system of the same nature. They got cold feet on it. Well, some of them did. Others said, we never quit around here in Hillsborough County. I'll put up all my own money to fight this. And fortunately, he was a minority. So you had Hillsborough County approve it 4-3. Manatee County was approached, and finally one year they said, you know what, we like this idea. They approved it 4-1. Now, they didn't go as far as Hillsborough County. They were kind of following Hillsborough County's lead, in which, okay, we'll wait for Hillsborough, we'll approve it, but we'll wait for Hillsborough County to forge the way, and then we'll follow. They eventually dropped it. Pinellas County voted 2-5 against it. However, the chairman overrode the vote and said, Superintendent, I want you to start investigating this and see what we can do. Well, the superintendent wasn't too enthused about it. He just kind of said, I ain't going to do it. I mean, actually, he was quoted in the newspaper and said, no, I'm not going to bother. So that was back then. Take a look at now. 2014, we have a gentleman by the name of Kenny American. He loves to bother his guys up in Columbia County. He's doing it now. As we speak, he's doing this. He is just as persistent as Clarence Winslow was back in the 1980s. He's been doing this for nearly a year now, so he's just getting started, but this is what he devotes his life to. He pays to place ads in the local newspaper, especially around election time, saying, why are you not agreeing to my debate about the subject? Why, once you stand up, give me a yes or no, what answer do you give on this subject? I check on a regular basis the school board meeting notes from Columbia County, and he's at every single one of them. He talks, he has the 2-minute speech now to perfection because he gives the 2-minute speech during every single school board meeting, talking about essentially the same thing. He writes letters to the editor, and he's constantly out there, a one-man picket of the school board. Yes, he goes out there to sign, and he pickets the school board building. He is relentless. Clarence Winslow was relentless. But Clarence Winslow wised up. He started by saying, you know what? I want the Bible alongside the textbook. But then, once he realized that's just not going to happen, he changed his tactic. He said, there's this thing called scientific creationism. It's all sciencey because it sounds like it. And we're going to put it alongside evolution, and he got finally how we wanted. This gentleman right here, Mr. American, he's still doing the Bible thing. Give him a year or two. I bet you someone's going to eventually put his arm around his shoulder and say, no, here's how you do it. I have no doubt. One day that's going to happen. Because I have history to tell me that's going to happen. 1920s, let's flip on back there. Bible Crusaders of America, 1926. They were going to actually toss out the governor because there was evolution in the textbooks. I have a quote here. Give me 1 second. No, guess not. In any case, they were successful. They led a crusade. They wanted evolution out of the textbooks, and they won. They won. A brand new textbook was brought in that didn't have evolution in it, and that stayed in the schools until the 1950s and 60s, or that type of book. It wasn't until the 1950s and 60s that they finally started putting books with evolution back into the schools. They were the ones who got it out. Flash forward to today, there's an organization called World Changers of Florida. Now they, in 2010, tried to get permission to distribute Bibles on school campuses in Collier County. The school board refused. The World Changers then sued them. They settled out of court and were given permission to distribute Bibles on school campuses. Now they didn't do it in person, they set up a table, they put the books on there, but nonetheless they won. They got Bibles in the schools. World Changers approached Orange County. It says, we want to do the same thing here in Orange County. They took a look at Collier County and says, we'll do what they're doing. World Changers of Florida won. They won. Now, once they won, Orlando Sentinel reporter talked to the president of the organization. And he says, and I quote, Rutherford, who grew up and attended public schools in Orange County, said he'd like to see schools incorporate Bible verses and religious teachings in schools, as well as offering creationism as a competing theory to evolution. Ladies and gentlemen, he won to get Bibles in schools. Now, that right there is a snapshot of their website, the R Objectives little part there in the middle. And notice the first one, to support the biblical account of creation, including having creation theory taught in our public schools. Now I did check, I check every time before I give a talk to see if they changed the website. Unfortunately, the website is down this morning when I checked, so I don't know what happened. Maybe it was just a technical glitch, maybe something's happened to the organization, I don't know. But the bottom line is that this was their goal. They had a goal before, and they accomplished that goal. What are they going to do with this goal if they keep on going? 1990, Gubernatorial Race between Martinez and, I wasn't McKay, McKay was the lieutenant governor, of course, can't remember. In any case, there was a huge deal about creationism because Martinez, who was running for re-election, said, you know what, I don't mind having creationism taught along with the theory of evolution. I think it's a pretty decent idea. Then, on the opposite side, the one running for lieutenant governor, Mr. McKay, he was asked about that question. He said, you know, did you hear what Governor Martinez said? What do you think about it? And he said, well, believing in scientific creationism is akin to thinking the earth is flat. Well, then Martinez's team got hold of that and says, oh, look what he says about us Christians. He thinks we're all stupid. And ran radio ads, and after he just did a ground-clearing campaign just based off that one flat earth quote. Absolutely amazing. Martinez lost. Now take a look at this. We have Mr. John Stenberger, who's in charge of the Florida Family Policy Council. Mr. Stenberger was the very key figure in the 2007-2008 over our state science standards, and then also a key figure when it went to the state legislature. One of his quotes that I absolutely love is, quote, yet we look at the fossil record, we find rats and bats, but no transitional forms of rats. Shows you his science education there. Once the science standards were approved, he said, and I quote, this is a sad day in Florida, when a handful of religious Darwinists had hijacked the curriculum framing process and pushed their ideological agenda at the expense of the education of our children. He is still very much active in many conservative causes. You just search the news for him and he's bound to pop up as a quote in some newspaper somewhere. He's still active, still out there, and I guarantee that we'll see him yet again. This is a never-ending fight. For us here in Florida, it started in the 1920s. Next year, our state science standards are up for a regular revision. Those state science standards are going to be released to the public in the middle of 2016. What do you bet that we're going to see this controversy yet again? I think I'm going to be adding another chapter to this book right here. Now, here I'm speaking on behalf of my book, and I'm also here speaking on behalf of an organization called Florida Citizens for Science. We've been in existence since 2005 with the purpose of fighting on behalf of science education in Florida. Now, the folks who are against the teaching of evolution are typically incredibly well organized because they handle other conservative causes as well. So they already have a network established. All they got to do is make a phone call or hit a button to send an email, and suddenly some public officials flooded with thousands upon thousands of emails and phone calls. On the science side, we just simply don't have that level of organization, especially not at the drop of a hat. We formed Florida Citizens for Science with the objective of bringing together various groups, a lot of small groups, maybe just a biology department at a university, perhaps Florida Academy of Sciences, we were able to work with them, and just bringing all these different organizations together so we can coordinate our message and try to fight back against that huge volume, all the massive numbers of people who speak for the other side. So I invite you, whether it's now or when you start hearing evolution in the news again, to look us up, Florida Citizens for Science, or you can look me up by my name, and you can check it out and become a member. We are especially looking for other organizations who want to come help us during this fight so that we can coordinate our messages and get our voices heard. With that said, let's see here. 1 second, I'm thinking. Hold on. Ma'am, will you please give me a number between 1 and 9, including 1 and 9? Just give me a number. 8. Give me a number between 1 and 9. 5. 5. Okay. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have a lot of work to do. Okay, anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have one question. So, if you're teaching middle school or high school science, you have to have a degree in science education, right?
You have that certification, yes.
Right, okay. So, my thought was that the people that are going for that degree would mostly be scientists and be people that would more believe in evolution than creation. No? So I'm thinking, wouldn't people teaching that be believers in evolution? And then if that's the case, why are they not teaching it? Is it public pressure, peer pressure, backlash, fear pressure? Because you wouldn't think like the religious right people that are going for creation would be people getting their degrees and teaching something.
First of all, there is a lot of pressure. All it takes is one very angry parent to make you feel very uncomfortable. And so there is that silencing factor where, okay, I don't want to stir up the public against me. I just want to keep my job here as a teacher, so I don't have tenure anymore. And I just want to keep my job here and not make any waves, so I'll bow under and not make a big deal out of this. There are some who are very science-minded. They really are. They enjoy science. They like science, but don't believe in evolution. There are plenty of those people, and plenty of those people want us teachers. Now, I have certification in teach high school biology, and I do have a degree in science education. I am also qualified to teach middle school math. I don't have any degree in math. That's because all I have to do is go take a certification test, and if I pass it, and I have a college degree, I can teach that subject. So there's another thing to think about. Maybe they don't have a science degree, maybe they have a degree in something else, and they pass the test and now they have certification.
Just on that note, I was on the textbook adoption committee for Broward County the last time we adopted a textbook. One of the other teachers on the textbook adoption committee was a creationist. She absolutely loved teaching about DNA. She absolutely loved chemistry. But you could hear her argue with me inside the little portable on the abandoned school that we usually go to. when she was talking about evolution, she's like, well, they found no human fossil ancestors. They're all just like old men whose skeletons got thrown by the rock and stuff. And I've had creationists who have taught in my department. So if they need a job, or if they love chemistry, if they love geology, if they love something else, then they go and they get a plan for what they're going to do in their head when they're going to teach it.
Yes, sir?
Didn't the Dover decision kind of put the squash on teaching creationism?
No. Now, keep in mind, and creationists don't like to hear this, but creationists, their tactics have evolved. It started out late in the 1920s. I want to outlaw the teaching of evolution because it's counter to the Bible. That's what he started. Then, when that kind of fell apart, it was, you know what, we have this scientific evidence for our view, scientific creationism. There's a change there. Now they're trying to take the science route. That fell apart. There's this thing called intelligent design. We're not going to talk about religion at all, just some unknown entity might have created life or something like that, but we're not going to talk about it. That's the next step in the change. And you're right, there was a decision in Pennsylvania, Dover, 2005, 2006, in which they tried to put intelligent design in some fashion into the schools there, and they went to court, and so the court shut down. It says no, intelligent design is not science. So what they're doing right now is, let's teach the controversy. There's all these other ideas and opinions, not all scientists agree. Let's go ahead and teach these other things. Allow teachers to have a conversation in the classroom about this without fear of being fired.
The Dover decision said that intelligent design is creationism, which is biblical creationism. So you cannot talk. So they can't really use that argument. They try.
But now they don't, intelligent design, no, it's not around anymore. That was a failed attempt. Now, the ones we had in 2008, 9, 10, the bills that were filed here in Florida, were all about just, kind of teach the controversy. It's okay to allow teachers to talk about these other possible ideas. And then when the senator is pressed, well, what other ideas do you have? I don't know. I'm not a science teacher. I just know there's other theories out there.
But again, going back to that concept, intelligent design is creation, which can't be taught. So they can't use that.
Yep, sir.
I'd like to hear what you say about the impact of global warming and its belief in creationism. Is it true that belief that global warming is not occurring is consistent with the belief that some supreme being created?
I'm not as well versed in climate change. I do know that is an issue, that could be an issue, and the science standards are reviewed next year. I'm not real sure. But I do know that, yes, it is a controversy within the religious community itself. There are certain denominations that are like, you know what, we need to take care of this earth, and we do believe that there is climate change, and I want to implore all of my flock to participate in that. And then you can have other denominations that say, no, it's all bull hockey, it's all junk science, and no, it's no such thing. So you definitely have a variety out there. It's not one thought. It's not one mind out there. There's a lot of different, a spectrum of ideas on it. Anything else?
My point is this. This thing that they think that 10,000 years that the world was created, does that mean the entire universe is 10,000 years old?
Give or take a few days with our Give or take a few days with our
Now, just like I said about climate change, there's a wide variety of views on evolution and creationism. There's young Earth creationism, which believes that that's one line. There's old Earth creationism. Yeah, the Earth and the universe is old, but nonetheless, God still created everything. Now, there's a wide variety, once again, a whole spectrum of thoughts on that subject. Yes, ma'am.
How do you handle in a classroom situation when a student objects to evolution and to a creationism?
Well, I'm about to encounter that. It's my first year of teaching. Next week actually starts my evolution unit, and so I will get to see how to do that. I've already had a challenge, though, when I was teaching genetics. I had a student say that old standard, if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? And I was able to tell her with confidence, we didn't come from monkeys. And then she was like, huh? What? Huh? And so I explained to her it came from common ancestor and so on and so on. So I'm anticipating that when I finally do hit evolution, that I might get some pushback on it. But the bottom line is that we are told by our district, I'm from Volusia County, we are told by our district, you have a curriculum. If you need to stand behind that curriculum, say, this is what I'm supposed to be teaching, do that. If you need to say it to a parent's complaining, will say, I'm sorry, it's right here in the curriculum, I have to teach it. Now you say to the students, I'm teaching science in a science classroom. You know, I am in no way degrading anybody's belief or trying to get you to change any belief you may have. I just need to teach you the science and try to stick to that.
Next year, when it comes up for review and revision again, how are you going to be a full-time teacher and a full-time leader?
Well, I had a full-time job last time. And hopefully, as I keep on hearing, first-year teaching is the hardest, and I'm living it. It's very hard. But you know, I'm hoping that next year isn't so bad. I have to admit, I'm a little concerned. I probably will need to talk to my principal or something like that, just to say, you know, my name might be out there. Do you mind? That's not, you know, the job that pays is a little bit more important than the job that doesn't. But no, I mean, I think the science canvas is supposed to come out actually June time frame, I think. So actually, I might have a couple months to work on full time. That'd be cool.
Also, thank you for your service.
All right. Thank you all for coming.